Heart rate is an extremely powerful tool to use in your training, but it's really not well explained well. And I see a lot of athletes do three common mistakes using their heart rate that might be hindering your progress in endurance. So we're going to try and solve this in this video. First of all, what is the best way of using or measuring heart rate? Should you use your watch or should you use a heart rate strap? It's important to understand that those two tools do not measure with the same technology. The watches use a light signal that is going to penetrate inside your skin and inside your blood vessels and essentially see the pulsating nature of blood flow underneath the light sensor. Whereas the heart rate strap is going to be measuring the electrical signal of your heart. And those are two very different ways of measuring the same thing, which is heart rate. And it's important to understand that watches are obviously getting better and better. I think 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said never use your watch to trust your heart rate and even less your heart rate variability, if that's something that you're interested in, because of the difference in technology and how trustworthy, let's say, the measurements are. Obviously, technology is getting a lot better, and I would say that you can start to rely more on the watch. I would still be wary of using your watch during a dynamic effort where you're moving a lot. For example, running when your arm is going up and down. It can cause some issues with measurement. So if you're using heart rate in training, I would typically recommend that you use a heart rate strap to measure it. Now, let's get to three of the issues that I see with heart rate. And the first one is that you think that your heart rate max is important or is an important number to know. We've learned from a long time back that to get to your heart rate max, you need to do 220 minus your age or some other fancy formula to find your maximal heart rate. What we didn't tell you is that the accurate formula is 220 minus your age plus minus 15 beats. So there's a 30 BPM window where your max heart rate could land compared to that 220 minus your age. It's going to depend on you. It's going to depend on your training level. It's going to depend on which mode of training we're talking about, whether we're talking about rowing, cycling, or running, because you're not going to express the same maximal heart rate in those different activities. And at the end of the day, knowing your maximal heart rate doesn't really matter, because the last thing you want to do is calculate your heart rate zones based on your max heart rate. We know that this doesn't work. We know that there's a huge variability from one person to the next. And don't tell me that you have a better model and that the Carvonen zones are better than the typical zones, because they might work for you, but they won't work for you in every mode of training, like I said before, and they definitely won't work for everybody. So I would highly recommend that you don't pay as much attention to your max heart rate. There's still something you could do with that max heart rate, and I'll talk to you about it a little bit later in this video. But first, let's go to the second point that I wanted to get to, which is these famous heart rate zones, the ones that your watch gives you. And a big issue is thinking that those zones are correct. Again, those zones are not set up for you unless you've set up the watch zone by zone, beat by beat, based on a test that you did. And I'll come back later on to talk about what type of test that I would recommend if you want to determine those zones. But typically, they're just given to you based on your age, the age that you enter in the watch, and they're going to do the math, 220 minus your age, and then they're going to take fixed percentages of your max heart rate, and that's going to be your heart rate zones. And I hear so many people come to me with the question of, I'm doing a VO2 max session, I'm doing the intervals, I'm going as hard as I can, but I can't get into zone 5. I just can't get up into zone 5. So am I really doing anything? Is my training worth it? Am I even developing my VO2 max? I can guarantee you that if you're doing VO2 max style intervals, whether they're short or long intervals, and you're going as hard as you can, you will be hitting close to your VO2 max, and you will be improving that VO2 max as well with this training, even though your watch tells you that you're still in zone 4. So it's really important to not pay attention to those heart rate zones unless you've calibrated them properly. And like I said, I'll give you a solution to do that just after. And the third problem that I see is worrying that your heart rate doesn't go up enough in training, and that because of this, it won't be enough of a stimulus to improve. it's very important to understand the following thing. Heart rate is a consequence of the intensity of your effort. It is not an intensity in and of itself. What I mean by this is that 150 BPMs does not mean anything. 120 BPMs does not mean anything. 180 BPMs does not mean anything. I'll give you two extreme examples to illustrate this point. 150 BPMs might be a 75-year-old's heart rate max while running, doing a VO2 max session. So if you're 75 and you're still doing VO2 max sessions running, props to you, my friend. I have the utmost respect for that. And I wish that everybody would continue and do this and could do this. So that might be your heart rate max on a running effort at that age. And 150 BPMs is also Tadej Pogacar's heart rate during his zone 2 training sessions, right? So think about this. One side, you have heart rate max of a senior runner. And on the other side, you have the zone 2 heart rate for one of the best cyclists in the world. Zone 2, which sounds easy, but he's still riding, 330 watts or something absolutely insane, right? So again, 150 doesn't mean anything. The number does not mean anything. It's not the intensity of the effort. It's just a consequence of the intensity of the effort, and that's dependent on you. It's dependent on your level. 150 doesn't mean the same in running and in cycling and in rowing and in swimming. So we need to contextualize those heart rate metrics. And again, don't think that because your heart rate won't go up as high as you're used to, that you're not getting a training effect. I see that a lot with runners that start to include cycling as a means of cross training in their routine, and they're expecting to see the same heart rates as what they see in running. Maybe they've calibrated their zones to running, but they're trying to use the same zones for cycling, or they just assume that because it's a cardio effort, it's cardiovascular, it has to do with the heart, so we need to pump the heart very high in order to get a training effect. But you can get a very good training effect at lower heart rates. In fact, the better your level, the more time you're going to spend at relatively lower heart rates, and it's still going to be very, very positive training for you in general. So don't worry if your heart rate doesn't go up on the bike as much as it goes up on the run. You're not using the same amount of muscle mass. You're not in the same physical position in space. I mean, lie down, look at your heart rate. Stand up, look at your heart rate. It's a different heart rate because you're not fighting gravity in the same way. Same with the position between running and cycling. We're not contracting the same muscles. We're not contracting them the same way. There's a lot more bounce on the run, different types of contractions, and it's more of a pushing motion on the bike. So all these things are going to influence your heart rate. So again, the most important thing to take away from this video is that heart rate is an expression or a consequence of the intensity of the effort and not an intensity in and of itself. And with this, before I get to the 3 solutions to the problems that I see with heart rate, I created an endurance physiology cheat sheet for you. It's free. All you have to do is share your email with me, and I will give you this PDF for free. You can click the link in the description to access it, to learn more about all the things that happen inside your body and to understand the different terminology that is used, the different thresholds, the lactate, the ventilation, all the things that we care about and that we want to better understand when it comes to training. Everything available directly in the description. Now for the 3 solutions, the first one is, again, don't pay so much attention to your heart rate max. And if you do, make sure you measure it in training and then track it over time. For example, I typically measure heart rate max with the athletes that I test during a physiological testing session, and we're going to look at the maximal heart rate that is reached on the last stage of the test, and we're going to take that as a reference point, and we're going to compare this over time when we do future tests. The most difference that I've seen is an increase of 17 beats per minute in 1 year of training on the bike for a CrossFitter. He went from 171 BPMs, and 1 year later, he went up to 188. Okay, so that's a massive change. Did he really unlock a new heart rate max? Or could his heart go up there all along and we just gave him the legs to go and express that on the bike? That's a different question. But I really think that you can look at your heart rate max, but you should not calculate it. And if you do measure it in training or in testing, then track it over time to look at the evolution and look at your progress with this. The second solution will be, instead of looking at your zones that your watch gives you that might work but might not and typically don't, is to calibrate your zones based on your RPE, on what you feel, or on a physiological test. And that test can be done with lactate, can be done with gas exchange. There's many different ways and types of tests that you can do, but typically we would like to calibrate your heart rate relative to your thresholds. Threshold 1, threshold 2, that are gonna delineate the intensity domains. I talk about all this in the endurance physiology cheat sheet that you can download just below. And this is how I think you can use heart rate intelligently when it comes to zones. Now, even with this, we still have to consider that in training, even though you're in zone 3 at the beginning of your tempo session, your heart rate, when you're above the first threshold, is going to drift up over time due to fatigue and increased inefficiency of muscle contractions. So even though you're in the right zone at the beginning of the session, you might drift out on a very long or a very hard session, and that's okay. But you can still use it as an indicator, and that gets us to the last point that I wanted to make. And for me, the most important and the best way to use heart rate in training, you want to compare apples to apples, meaning you want to compare a training session to the same training session down the line. So you want the same format. Maybe you're running 3 times 12 minutes with 3-minute rest, like a tempo run, RPE 5, and you're running that at, let's say, 12 kilometers per hour, and you want to measure your heart rate on that session. And then maybe 4 weeks down the line, 6 weeks or 8 weeks down the line, you want to repeat the exact same session, 3 by 12 minutes on 3-minute rest, RPE 5, 12 kilometers per hour, measure the heart rate and look at the difference. Look at the evolution. Look at the difference in heart rate drift. Look at the difference in average heart rate on each one of the 12-minute blocks. Look at how fast it rises. Look at how fast it goes down. And this is going to be a sure way to see progress and to measure progress intelligently with your heart rate. But again, your heart rate is an expression or a consequence of the intensity of the effort and not the intensity itself. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm happy to be back with some content on the English channel. If you have any questions, drop a comment below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.